I never believed in the old stories, but now I wish I had. It was a cold October evening when I found myself on the edge of the Lakota Reservation, far from the city's familiar hum. I'd come to document something ordinary: landscapes, the autumn colors settling like a quiet whisper across the hills. Yet as I walked through those thick woods, something else crept into my mind, an unnatural stillness that hung in the air, like I'd been submerged in a space untouched by time. The locals warned me not to wander alone. "There are places best left undisturbed," an elder had said, his voice carrying the weight of 1,000 silent memories. But my skepticism held steady. I laughed it off, mistaking their reverence for mere superstition, a holdover from times when people feared what lay beyond the firelight. By the time I realized the gravity of his words, it was too late. The first unsettling sensation came as I walked deeper into the woods, where the paths narrowed and twisted as though deliberately leading me astray. Shadows loomed large and unnatural, stretching across the ground in grotesque forms, even though the sun had already dipped below the horizon. It was as if the shadows themselves had life, moving when I looked away, stilled only by my gaze. Then the sounds began, whispers that felt too close, breaths of sound barely audible, yet prickling against my skin as if someone were standing inches from my ear. Each step I took seemed to echo in the air, yet in a way that felt muffled, like the forest itself was devouring the noise. I stumbled upon an abandoned cabin, its wooden beams twisted and rotting, the roof sagging as though crushed by an unseen weight. With every step closer, the air grew thicker, and a chill ran up my spine, despite the stagnant warmth that pressed down on me. Strange symbols were carved into the wooden doorframe, marks I didn't recognize yet felt an instinctual aversion to. They resembled jagged, ancient glyphs, symbols imbued with an unspoken menace that seemed to pulse with life. I turned to leave, but a low, rumbling laughter rolled through the trees. Not like any laughter I'd ever heard. It was hollow and strained, as if coming from someone who hadn't laughed in centuries. I spun around but saw nothing, only shadows shifting, merging, then dispersing as though mocking me. Heart pounding, I pushed myself to move faster, determined to leave this place behind. The deeper I went, the more surreal the forest became. The trees themselves seemed to bend toward me, their twisted branches reaching out, and the ground beneath my feet felt as if it were breathing, a rhythmic pulse that matched my quickening heartbeat. I started to feel like I wasn't alone, like the forest had eyes, watching, judging, waiting. And then I saw him. He stood a few paces ahead, barely visible through the mist that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. An elder, clad in traditional garb, his figure blending seamlessly into the shadows. He raised a hand, motioning for silence, and whispered something I couldn't quite hear. His eyes, ancient and sorrowful, bored into mine with an intensity that sent a wave of dread through my body. "Do not go further," he murmured, his voice a fragile thread that could snap at any moment. "You're marked now, watched by them. They know you do not belong." Before I could respond, he vanished, his form dissipating into the mist as though he'd never been there. I was left alone with his warning echoing in my mind, words that wrapped around me like a shroud. Panic set in, and I hurried forward, hoping to find the path back. But the forest had changed. It was no longer a collection of trees, but a labyrinth with paths that twisted back onto themselves, leading me deeper, not out. My breaths came in shallow gasps, and I began to shiver uncontrollably, though the air felt stifling, pressing down on me like a weight I couldn't shake. The whispers returned, more insistent this time, louder, circling me from every direction. And then, in the corner of my eye, I saw them, figures that didn't seem quite human. They were tall, their limbs elongated, moving in ways that defied natural rhythm, as if their bones bent in impossible angles. Their faces were obscured, yet I could feel their eyes piercing through me. and with each step they took, the world seemed to darken, their shadows stretching like ink, blotting out the last remnants of light. I stumbled backward, tripping over something hard and cold. Looking down, I saw another strange symbol etched into the ground, this one more intricate, spiraling out in fractal patterns that hurt my eyes to focus on. I felt a sudden drop in temperature, a cold that seeped into my bones, and with it, a silence so complete that even my heartbeat seemed muted, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. And then I heard it, a low, guttural sound, like a growl that rose from the depths of the earth. It resonated through the trees, vibrating the air around me, and I felt an overwhelming urge to run. But my legs refused to move, as if rooted to the spot by an unseen force. Out of nowhere, the elder reappeared, his face etched with sorrow and something else, pity, maybe, or resignation. "You must go," he urged, his voice trembling. "They have already chosen you. If you remain, you will become one of them." Without thinking, I tried to speak, to beg him for guidance, but my voice failed me. All I could manage was a shaky nod, and as I turned to flee, his words echoed in my mind, each syllable sinking in like a weight. "Do not look back." But curiosity gnawed at me, a pull I couldn't resist. Just a single glance, I told myself. Just one. I wish I hadn't. In that brief look over my shoulder, I saw them, a sea of eyes watching, each pair reflecting a life taken, souls trapped, their gazes hollow and lifeless. And there, in the center of it all, a figure I recognized. Me, my own face staring back, mouth open in a silent scream. I broke into a sprint, lungs burning, heart racing, but no matter how far I ran, the forest seemed endless, as if stretching out to keep me within its grasp. The whispers grew louder, blending into laughter, until I couldn't distinguish where one sound began and the other ended. Now, back in the safety of my home, I can still feel the weight of their eyes upon me, shadows dancing at the edge of my vision, sounds in the silence that don't belong. I fear sleep, knowing that in the darkness they're waiting, that the forest will call me back. Because I'm marked, and somehow, deep down, I know that they're patient,